Welcome to Tales from the Pillow, a calm place for unsettling stories. If you enjoy the quiet dread before sleep, subscribe and let the stories keep you company in the dark. They say there are places in the world that don't belong to any map, not forgotten, just ignored, as if the earth itself tries to keep certain wounds covered. I wasn't looking for anything that day, just walking. I'd taken a week off work, shut my phone off, and headed north into the forest to disappear for a while. No one knew where I was, not even me, really. I followed the tree line like a compass needle and let the silence drag me deeper. By the third day, the trees had thickened. I hadn't seen a trail marker in hours. The forest had that quiet tension, like it was holding something in its lungs. That's when I found it. It was nestled in a hollow of pines draped in moss and shadow. A small wooden church, untouched by time but strangely intact, more so than it had any right to be. Its white paint had long since peeled away, revealing dark, weathered boards beneath. The steeple still stood, crooked but proud, and a rusted bell hung silently in the tower. The front doors were already open, not wide, but enough to see the narrow darkness inside. Something about the sight gave me pause. Not fear, not exactly, more like reverence, the kind of quiet that presses down on your shoulders and makes you feel like you should whisper. I stepped through the doorway. The air was cold, much colder than outside, stale, too, like something had been sealed for a long, long time. Dust motes floated in the faint shafts of light piercing through the stained glass, but otherwise the church was normal. Too normal. An altar stood at the far end, covered in a faded white cloth. Rows of pews stretched back in two neat columns, the wood rotting but mostly intact. There were crosses on the walls, a crucifix above the pulpit. Candles, long burned down, sat in iron holders at every pew. It looked lived in, maintained even, but no one could have done that. Not this deep, not way out here. I walked slowly down the center aisle, each step echoing slightly off the wooden floor. My fingers brushed the backs of the pews. They were dusty but not cold, as if someone had been there recently. I reached the altar. There was something about it I couldn't explain. It felt off, like the angles didn't quite align with the rest of the room. The crucifix above it seemed to tilt downward just slightly, as if watching. Behind the altar, half obscured by a faded red curtain, was a door. But not a normal door. It was narrow, set into the floor itself. A trap door, thick iron hinges, no handle. My breath caught in my throat. There was something deeply wrong about that door. And yet, I knelt, brushed the dust away, and pulled it open. A staircase descended into darkness. Stone steps, worn, narrow, as if carved by hand long ago. There was no smell. No earth, no mildew, no rot, just cold air, completely still. I should have closed it. I should have backed away and never returned. Instead, I reached into my pack, pulled out my flashlight, and stepped down. The wooden hatch fell shut behind me. I didn't hear it slam. I just turned after 2 steps and found it closed, and locked. I stood in a new church, identical in shape, in structure, but wrong in the details. The pews here were gone, replaced by rows of empty chairs, plastic, cheap. The altar was bare, a single candle burned on it, fresh, wax pooled neatly around its base, still warm. The stained glass windows had been replaced with narrow vertical slits that let in no light, and at the far end of the church, in the front row, sat a woman. She was dressed in a nurse's uniform, pale blue, blood on her collar. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the altar. I didn't speak, not yet. I crept closer, each step echoing like thunder in the tight space. As I reached the second row, she turned. Her eyes were completely white, no iris, no pupil, and yet they locked onto mine. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice soft and echoing. "Not yet." My mouth opened, but nothing came out. She stood, blood soaked through her uniform in slow patches like her body was remembering wounds. "I waited here," she whispered. "I waited until I forgot my name, and now I'm part of the hall, like the others, like you'll be. She raised a hand and pointed past me. I turned, another staircase, leading down, stone steps, narrow, dark. I turned back to her, but she was gone. The church was empty again. I looked up toward the hatch where I'd entered. There was no door, just stone ceiling, no way back, only the stairs going down. I hesitated for a long time, my hand against the cold stone wall, my heart drumming in my chest. Then I descended. The second staircase was narrower than the first. Each step echoed, but not in a way I could track. Like the sound bounced off the wrong surfaces, took too long to return. It made me feel unsteady, like my own body was stuttering as I moved. When I reached the bottom, I found myself standing in the same church again. Same shape, same layout, but the differences were immediate. There was no light, natural or artificial, only a dim, sourceless gray that made everything look flat and washed out, like I'd stepped into a memory someone had half erased. The walls here were stone, not wood, cracked, old, veined with moisture. The pews were intact but wrong, too tall, too narrow, like they were made for people thinner than us. But the worst part was the sound, faint at first, like breathing. No, not breathing, mimicking it. A long, drawn-in inhale, a pause, a slow exhale, coming from somewhere in the pews. I crept forward, flashlight trembling in my hand, even though the beam seemed to lose its strength after a few feet. The rows stretched longer than they had any right to, dozens of them, too many for a church this size. That's when I saw him, a man, sitting in the third pew from the front, perfectly still. He wore a suit, old, dusty, black. His head was bowed slightly, his hands folded. He looked like he was praying. But the moment I stepped into the aisle, his head snapped up. Not turned, snapped, like something wound too tightly and then released. His eyes met mine, and he smiled. It was a dry, humanless smile, teeth too clean, lips cracked and colorless. He didn't speak, I just sat there, staring as if he'd been waiting centuries for someone to arrive. I should have turned around, but there was nowhere to go. So I walked toward him, 3 pews away, 2, 1. I stopped at the row behind him. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The only sound was that long, soft inhale and exhale, but it wasn't coming from him. I glanced around, nothing, no windows, no altar, just the man in the endless gray. Finally, he spoke. "I used to sit in this pew every Sunday," he whispered. His voice was hoarse, like paper scraping wood. "She said the third row was closest to God's ears." "Who?" I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to face the altar. His neck didn't move. His entire body rotated, shoulders cracking, spine bending unnaturally as if his joints had been forgotten. I followed his gaze. There was someone standing behind the altar. A woman, young, head tilted to the side like her neck had broken and never healed. She wore a white dress stained with something dark. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She raised one hand and pointed directly at me. "Do you remember the sermon?" the man in the pew asked. I turned to him. His smile was gone. Now his eyes were wide, trembling. "She said the third pew would keep us safe." He reached out, fast, and grabbed my wrist. His fingers were like wire, thin, cold, crushing. "She lied." Suddenly he screamed, not a human scream, something deeper, a noise that pulled sound from the walls, made the air shake. His face stretched, mouth opening too wide, skin tearing at the corners. His eyes rolled back into his skull, and he began to pull me down into the space between the pews, where the floor no longer existed, only blackness, only the fall. I fought, screamed, kicked at the pew. My flashlight fell, clattering uselessly on the stone. I clawed at the floorboards, dirt beneath my nails. And then his hand let go. I slammed onto the ground, gasping, heart thundering. When I looked up, the pews were gone. The man was gone. The woman behind the altar, gone. And at the far end of the now empty chamber, another staircase, down. For a long time, I didn't move. I sat in the cold, wet air, staring at those stairs, willing them to vanish. They didn't. I could no longer see where I'd come from. The space above me was solid stone. Only one path remained, and so, trembling, I stood. I picked up my flashlight, and I descended again. The staircase twisted. Unlike the first two descents, this one curved tightly, doubling back on itself in impossible angles like a spiral drawn by a shaking hand. The steps were slick with condensation now, and every footfall echoed as if I were walking through the belly of something alive. I reached the next floor slower this time. My body wasn't just tired, it was starting to reject this. Every instinct screamed that I should be running up toward air and light, not deeper into this impossible place. But there was no going back. I stepped into the third church. This one was larger. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, vanishing into shadows. The pews had returned, but were warped, each one twisted slightly toward the center aisle, like ribs curving toward a spine. And the altar had changed again. This time it was shaped like a grand piano, though the keys were missing and the wood was blackened with soot. The walls were covered in sheet music, hundreds of pages tacked and nailed in uneven rows. Most were smeared with ink, the notes distorted and bled together like veins. Every few steps I passed candles lodged in the floor, their flames flickering with a faint blue hue. And then I heard it, singing, software female, a clear soprano voice echoing faintly through the chamber. It wasn't words, just a melody, slow, mournful, looping in perfect hypnotic rhythm. I followed the sound. She sat in the front pew. A girl, maybe 18, pale dress, black hair down her back like a curtain. Her head was bowed. She rocked gently, the same melody spilling from her mouth in steady, perfect measure. I watched her for a moment, frozen by the purity of the voice. It was too perfect, too practiced, like a recording. Then she stopped and spoke without lifting her head. "Are you going to sing with me?" My mouth went dry. "No," I said quietly. "I don't know the song." She tilted her head to one side, slowly, too far, until I heard the pop of a vertebra. "But you do," she said. I took a step back. "You used to sing it in your sleep." That stopped me cold. The air around her had changed. The candles flickered harder. The shadows on the wall began to shift. I shook my head. "I don't know you." She finally lifted her head. Her face was off, almost right, but the features didn't quite belong together. Her eyes were too far apart, her nose slightly too low, her mouth stretched just a fraction too wide. But the worst part, she looked familiar, not as someone I knew, as someone I dreamed of. "All of us know the song eventually," she whispered. "It's the price for staying. The deeper you go, the more of the song you remember, the more of yourself you lose." I turned away. I didn't want to hear more. I didn't want to remember anything. I just wanted to wake up from this. She stood, slowly, and then she began to sing again. This time the sound was wrong, backward, like a voice being rewound through cracked speakers. The notes twisted, bent, broke. Her mouth opened wider than a jaw should allow, and a thick, wet sound crawled up from her throat, like she was vomiting melody. The walls vibrated, the sheet music began to bleed, and suddenly, she screamed. It was one word, shrieked in a voice that split into 6 tones at once. "Stop!" I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a pew. Behind me, another staircase had appeared, jutting directly out of the floor where the aisle ended. Down! Of course. I looked back. The girl had stopped singing. She now stood perfectly still, hands at her sides, face blank. "Go," she said, not unkindly, "before the music sticks to your bones." I descended, faster this time, but with each step I swore I could still hear the song, trailing behind me, like it had learned the sound of my name. The stairs felt different this time. They weren't stone anymore, not wood either, just something flat and black, like polished obsidian. My feet didn't make a sound, and my flashlight no longer cast a beam. The darkness ahead wasn't empty, it was heavy, breathing. When I reached the next floor, there was no church. just a massive circular chamber. The ceiling stretched up into fog, and the ground beneath me looked like rippling glass. Shapes drifted below its surface, faces, hands, flickers of light. The air buzzed like an old radio caught between stations. The silence wasn't still anymore. It was charged. Then I saw them. 4 figures stood at the edge of the chamber, still, watching. As I stepped closer, I recognized each one. The nurse from the first floor, blood still soaking through her uniform. The man from the third pew, arms folded stiffly, mouth set in a disapproving line. The singer, her head tilted, black hair draped over her face, a voice humming so faintly it made my teeth ache. And a 4th figure stood between them. A new man, tall, thin, dressed like a priest in tattered robes. His face was hidden beneath a veil of black lace, and his hands were stained with ink. He spoke. "You've walked the path, you've seen the echoes, now you must answer." His voice rang out like a bell in an empty valley, low and reverent, but soaked in something wrong. I took a step forward. "What do you want from me?" "Not want," the priest said, "only truth." He raised one hand. A small table appeared in front of him, wooden, ordinary. On it sat a closed book, black leather binding, no title. A single lit candle flickered beside it. The priest gestured. "You will answer 3 questions. If your truth aligns with the path, the door will open above. You will return to the church you left behind. If your answers falter, you will descend once more, and remain." The singer began to hum again, a lullaby twisted and out of tune. I swallowed hard. "Ask," I said. The priest nodded. He opened the book. The first question came like a whisper in my head, though no one had spoken. "When did you first lie to yourself?" I blinked. Images bloomed in my mind. A hospital hallway, fluorescent lights, my brother in a bed, his hand limp in mine. I remembered saying, "He's going to be fine." I said it out loud. I said it to myself. I even believed it. But I knew. Deep down, I knew he wasn't waking up. My mouth moved before I could stop it. "That night, in the hospital." The candle flickered. The nurse closed her eyes. The priest turned a page. "Whose voice do you hear when you're alone?" I hesitated longer. This one felt like a trap. Sometimes I heard my mother, other times my own. But in the deepest moments, those sleepless, unraveling nights, I heard something else. A voice I never recognized, cold, whispering in corners, telling me I'd been chosen for something I'd never understand. "I don't know," I said. The man from the pew grimaced. The candle dimmed slightly. One page turned, the final question. "What are you most afraid of? Truly?" I opened my mouth, then stopped. Every answer felt like a lie. Dying? Number pain? Number being forgotten? Maybe. But the truth, the horrible truth, was simpler than that. I looked up at the priest, of being stuck, of never getting out, of never knowing why this happened. The candle went out, the book snapped shut, and for the first time, the priest lowered his head. "You have spoken." The singer stopped humming. The chamber rumbled beneath me. The floor rippled outward like glass catching wind, and behind me, a sound, a trapdoor, opening. I turned. There it was, the hatch. The same iron-hinged hatch from the original church floor. Wood, warped by time, hanging open, waiting. "Go," the priest said softly. "Find what waits." I stepped toward it, heart in my throat, and descended one last time. The trapdoor opened without resistance. No lock, no groan of rusted hinges, just silence and a waiting dark beneath it. I stared down, heart pounding, braced for the light of the original church. The warm wooden pews, the crooked steeple, the stained glass. I had answered the questions, I had faced the spirits. I had descended further than any sane person ever would. Now I wanted out. I stepped through the hatch and fell. I hit the ground hard. It wasn't wood beneath me or stone. It was something soft, springy, almost like carpet. I blinked, looked up. The hatch was gone. No light above me, no opening, just black ceiling stretching upward forever. The room I stood in was familiar. pews, an altar, candles in the walls, all flickering gently, but there were no doors, no windows, no stairs, just me and a church that looked too pristine, preserved almost, like it had been waiting for something, for me. I turned slowly, scanning the space, and then I saw it. A mirror hung where the altar should have been, tall, framed in black iron. In it, I saw the church reflected perfectly, but I was not alone in the mirror. Someone sat in the front pew. I stepped closer. The figure was hunched, still, wrapped in shadow, but its movements mirrored mine, every step, every breath, until I reached the front row and realized it was me, or something wearing me. It looked up and smiled. "Welcome," it said. I didn't speak. "Every soul that comes down here thinks they're just passing through," it continued. "They think there's a test to pass, a riddle to solve, but it's never about answers." It leaned forward, fingers steepled under its chin. "It's about surrender." I backed away, but the mirror didn't move with me anymore. The reflection stayed where it was, still staring from the pew, still smiling. Then it stood, walked forward, out of the mirror. I ran. I didn't even know where, just down the aisle, between pews, looking for any exit. I screamed, called out to the spirits, to the priest, to anything that could hear me. But no one came, only my footsteps, only the quiet, until I reached the center of the room. And there, on the floor, was a single object, a wooden trap door, closed, shaking. I dropped to my knees and pulled it open. Below was darkness. My heart leapt. Maybe this was it. Maybe the priest had lied. Maybe there was still one more level, one more chance. I descended. The next church was identical, down to the warped pews, the blank altar, the flickering candles, but this time there was no mirror, only silence. I stood there for a long time, waiting, for footsteps, for a voice, for anything. Nothing came. Eventually, I found myself drifting to the front pew, sitting, folding my hands, and that's when I heard it. Far above, so faint it could have been wind. Footsteps, soft, hesitant. Someone was coming down. Someone had found the church. A smile tugged at my lips, against my will, because now I understood. There was never a test, never a way out.